In the First World War, Germany financed their war efforts by borrowing. This would turn out to be their undoing, as the mark fell against the dollar during the course of the war from a little over 4 to almost 9 marks per dollar. By 1919, it was 32 marks to the dollar. In 1921, Germany was required to pay war reparations. The mark fell to 330 per dollar. Germany continued to print marks to exchange for foreign currency in order to pay the reparations, and the mark continued to fall as the printing press ran. Eventually, hyperinflation set in and it went to 800 marks per dollar. By 1923, it took over 4.2 billion marks for $1 US. You can see how things snowballed to the point where the Germans were forced to choose between two unacceptable alternatives. In the end, their inaction resulted in failure. If you searched on the internet, you may discover that Soviet Russia experienced something similar from 1917 to 1924. During their hyperinflation period, they engaged in 3 successive redenominations. New rubles replaced old at the rates of 10,000 to 1, 1922, 100 to 1, 1923, and 50,000 to 1, 1924. While the hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s was the most famous in history, the Hungarian pengu and Zimbabwean dollar have both been even more inflated. Because the hyperinflation got so out of hand in Hungary, they had to essentially scrap the pengu for a new currency called the forint. In 1946, the government started swapping out the pengu for the forint at an exchange of 400 octillion pengu for 1 forint. It was said that prices doubled on average every 15 hours, making people's savings worthless. When Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980, the Zimbabwean dollar was reportedly more valuable than the US dollar. Hyperinflation in Zimbabwe began in the late 1990s, shortly after the confiscation of private farms from landowners at the end of the Second Congo War. In June of 2015, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe officially valued their currency at 0. More recently, we've seen how one country's currency can cause another to fail. As reported in EU Business, Mario Skandalis, a senior official of the Bank of Cyprus, blamed their collapse on the Greek debt crisis. We lost 4.5 billion euros in the process. In order to prevent account holders from removing the rest of their savings at once, controls included a cash withdrawal limit and a curb on how much money individuals can take abroad. Anyone leaving the country, whether Cypriot or a visitor, could only take up to 1,000 euros with them in cash. So much for cash being a viable means for dealing with a sudden hiccup in the economy. Can that happen here? Devaluation is the deliberate downward adjustment in the official exchange rate and reduces the currency's value relative to others. To the extent that devaluation is viewed as a sign of economic weakness, devaluation may dampen investor confidence in the country's economy and hurt the country's ability to secure foreign investment. Revaluation is an upward change in the currency's value. Revaluation, which makes a currency more expensive, might be undertaken in an effort to reduce a current account surplus where exports exceed imports or to attempt to contain inflationary pressures. Redenomination is where a new currency replaces the old currency, with a fixed number of old units being converted into one new unit. Many countries have done this over time, including many of those discussed here. While currencies are a relatively new addition, gold and silver have been used as a medium of exchange for thousands of years. So in the event of an economic hiccup or collapse, will you be out there trading your gold or silver for things you need? What if government prohibits trading in gold or silver? Some people think that the government will confiscate your gold before the collapse occurs, exchanging their appreciating gold for an increasingly worthless paper. And still others think that gold could be the currency itself, so they're going to hold on to what they have. Students of history may recall that the government did in fact confiscate or at least coerced people into voluntarily giving up their gold in 1933. Executive Order 6102, signed by Franklin D. Roosevelt, forbid the hoarding of gold bullion and gold certificates within the continental United States. The government required surrender by May 1, 1933, to the Federal Reserve. The public was paid $20.67 per troy ounce. Magnanimously, the order exempted gold coins having recognized special value to collectors of rare and unusual coins, which is a very important point to remember. The Gold Reserve Act in 1934 required the Federal Reserve to transfer all gold and gold certificates to the U.S. Treasury. It also set the price of gold from the Treasury for international transactions at $35 an ounce. This devalued the U.S. dollar since the dollar was gold-based. This price remained in effect until August 15, 1971, when President Richard Nixon announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold at a fixed value, thus abandoning the gold standard for foreign exchange. So if they could confiscate gold again, why even have gold? Several reasons. First, will U.S. citizens allow confiscation again, now that they know how the game was played in 1933? Second, there were exceptions for certain collector coins in 1933, so historically, coins were a much safer bet. Okay, but could the government decide to take coins this time? Anything is possible, but the rare coin market is very small compared to the bullion and jewelry markets. Rare coins have been traded legally in bad times before, because governments have no way to properly determine extrinsic value in mass quantity. What if China decides to demand precious metals for trade? What if it stops accepting the dollar due to devaluation or some other reason? Is it completely inconceivable that the U.S. government wouldn't cave to the Chinese and take control of all the bullion in our country just to satisfy the Chinese demand? How do we know that this hasn't already happened? After all, we're not allowed to know what is or isn't in Fort Knox. So, how would having gold help? Well, in a redenomination, your gold could be used to convert into the new currency after it's issued. Which do you think will give you a better conversion rate, the old, devalued currency or gold that has an international trading value? Conversely, in a revaluation, trading your gold for a foreign currency may be an even better bet, since it may well have a more favorable exchange rate into the new, revalued U.S. currency. If you're thinking that you'll be bartering with precious metals, then silver might make more sense. If you're thinking you'll be holding it and trading it for the new currency, then gold might make more sense. Then there's the issue of possession. If you're truly looking at gold as being your safeguard from the unlikely event of an economic hiccup or collapse, you'll want to have physical possession of your gold. Having it stored somewhere else may not allow you the access when you need it most. In reality, there are so many factors that you should consider consulting a precious metal specialist who can discuss all the factors you may want to consider when arriving at your decision. You might also want to call and get the full printed report, as it contains even more detail on this topic.